I'd like to go ahead and call to order this February 26th meeting of the Monterey County Planning Commission at 9 o'clock, and to ask Commissioner Gomez to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Good morning, Commissioner Shaw. Here. Commissioner Getzelman.
Here.
Commissioner Work is absent. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Here.
Commissioner Mendoza.
Here.
Commissioner Deal.
Here.
Commissioner Monsalve. Here. Commissioner Hartzell.
Here.
Commissioner Gomez.
Here.
Commissioner Roberts is absent. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. This is a time for us to give the instructions on how you can participate remotely and for translation. Madam Clerk, whoever the heck you are, Madam Secretary, would you please give us the instructions for people who want to participate on Zoom?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, everyone, for joining. If you are joining via Zoom today, there are multiple ways that you can participate. First, the Zoom link, You can, during public comment for individual items and for the agenda, you can raise your hand by opening the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and clicking the raise hand icon. On a mobile or landline, you can raise and lower by pressing *9. Another way you can participate during public comment during the hearing is by sending an email to pchearingcomments@countyofmonterey.gov. This email address is on today's agenda as well. We do monitor that in real time, but now that the meeting has started, we cannot guarantee that we will capture all comments via the email, but we definitely do our best. If during public comment you are waiting for your turn to speak with your hand raised, you will, when it's your turn, be given permission by the meeting clerk to unmute yourself. You will need to unmute yourself on the Zoom by looking for the microphone button and pushing it at the bottom of your screen to mute and unmute, and on a phone, pressing *6 to mute, *6 to unmute. We also, do you want me to say the Wordly stuff today? I need the cheat sheet though. Do you want to put I think I'll learn.
We also are using a interpretation service, and we're utilizing Wordly during today's meeting. Scan the provided QR code or access the meeting via the link on the screen. Once you are logged in, select your preferred language and select on Attend to join. If you're in the chambers, please use headphones or see the clerk for the use of the listening device. If you have additional questions regarding Wordly, please email pchearingcomments@countyofmonterey.gov. Thank you.
Thank you both. So this is a time that's set aside for public comments on items that are not on today's agenda, but which are under the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. Was there anybody in the chambers who would like to come forward and do that? Please do. You'll have 3 minutes. Welcome, Mr. Green.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Tim Green. My comments are going to take a little more than 3 minutes. I appreciate the time.
I'll give you 3.5.
Thank you. I have 2 requests. The first would be the Commission consider changing the Big Sur CIP BS 98 2014-50 B1C5. It is faulty. Martha Deal and I have both realized that this portion of the plan, which addresses the baseline for counting VSUs by saying after certification, has no basis in the plan. It references Table 1 of the Land Use Plan as a source, but there is no support for it there. But what the Land Use Plan says about the VSU count is clear. Chapter 5, Sections 1 and 4 read, I read in part, quote, "At present, there are a total of 168 rooms, and the following density standards for in-unit development are designed to allow up to 300 new visitor-serving lodge or inn units based on the protection of the capacity of Highway 1, to accommodate recreational use. The 300 new units allowed by the plan are counted from the baseline of 168 rooms cited in the plan for a cap of no more than 468 rooms or VSUs on the coast. The Big Sur Chamber of Commerce's VSU count is 455, 13 under the 468 cap. Cape Big Sur Wild's count is 482, 14 over the cap. By these two counts, the cap on VSUs is very close to or has already been exceeded. But the county claims that an additional 187 VSUs can be built. The faulty CIP has contributed to the county's gross error in the cap count. I am asking the Commission to look at this CIP and to inform the next meeting as to whether or not a correction will be made. We all know that Highway 1 during busy periods of the year is congested and overcrowded. This was seen 50 years ago when the transportation study concluded that, quote, the capacity of the existing highway cannot even support the projected recreational travel demand. To address the limited highway capacity and to preserve the public's access to the scenic highway, the land use plan limited all development, residential, commercial, and public. The cap on VSUs now in question is a key policy of the BSU LUP and needs to be addressed in its update. With evidence that the cap has already been exceeded, the county's VSU count is at fault. A moratorium on VSUs is necessary and until the issue is resolved. In light of this finding, I would ask the Commission to reconsider its conclusion to the referred item on a moratorium taken on January 29th, 2023 as item 5. In conclusion, if the plan limits are not followed, the public's access to the scenic highway will be sacrificed in favor of expanded commercial development. This is contrary to the intent of the land use plan to protect the general public's access to Highway 1. This is one of the most popular drives in the world. Public access to it is at issue. Thank you, Commissioners, for your time and your attention.
And thank you, Mr. Green, for your comments. Is there anybody else in the chambers who would like to make a comment on an item not on today's agenda? Another person that we've never seen before, a young man named Mr. Panzer, I believe.
Sort of not on the agenda, but I know you're electing new officers. I had a high number of projects last year before the commission, and I do appreciate what the commission does, as volunteers to our community, but more importantly, to recognize Chair Deal's handling of the commission. I think you've done a terrific job, and appreciate your service.
Thank you, Mr. Panzer. I guess practice does make at least closer to perfect. Anyone else in the chambers would like to speak on a matter who's not on today's agenda? Seeing no one, Madam Clerk, is there anybody online who would like to do that?
There are no additional emails and no hands up on Zoom.
Thank you. That being the case, we'll go ahead and close public comment and come back to the clerk for any additions, deletions, or corrections to the agenda. Madam Clerk?
For the record, we received additional correspondence for agenda item number 1, which is PLN 240004, and agenda item number 2, which is PLN 210306, all of which were emailed and distributed via today's meeting on the right side of the chambers for available for the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, now this is a time set aside for commissioner comments, requests, or referrals. Commissioners, anything of that nature today? I don't see anyone running to the microphone. That being the case, I'm going to go ahead and move along and close that section and move to scheduled matters, which is my favorite today. The first of which is the election of new officers. And I believe our nominating committee is going to speak. I think Commissioner Shaw is going to speak from the nominating committee. Commissioner?
Yes, thank you. So we met and we discussed this, and we are nominating Commissioner Gonzalez for chair and Commissioner Getzelman for vice chair.
Thank you. Are there any further nominations? I assume we have to take public comment on something like that? Let's just do it anyway. There's no penalty if we don't. If there are any comments from the commission, seeing none, is there anybody in the chambers who would like to speak on that matter? I don't see anybody. Madam Clerk, is there anyone online?
There are no hands up on Zoom and no additional emails.
Thank you. That being the case, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment and bring back to the commission. Commissioners, Commissioner Monsalve.
Do we need a second?
The nominating committee moved, and you're welcome to second that.
A second.
Are there any further nominations? Anybody want to nominate somebody from the floor? I don't see anybody. Anybody want to speak on the motion? No? That being the case, we'll go ahead and close that part and take the vote. All those in favor of electing Commissioner Gonzalez as chair and Commissioner Getzelman as vice chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, no? Any abstentions? Seeing none, so be it. Thank you all.
Well, first of all, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity. And with that, we're going to go ahead and continue with the agenda. And next item on the agenda is PLN 24. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I thought that was already done. No? Oh.
Yeah, you're correct. There weren't any.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And next item on the agenda is PLN 240004, Griffith, Richard, and Nancy TRS. And so with that, we're gonna go ahead and let the staff make a presentation on this particular item on the agenda. Staff?
Thank you, Chair Gonzalez. Quinn, can you please share HDMI right? Thank you. Good morning again, Chair Gonzalez and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Fiona Jensen. I will be presenting HCD planning file number PLN 240004, Griffith. The project is located at 1 Rumson Trace Carmel within the Santa Lucia Preserve in the Greater Monterey Peninsula Area Plan. The parcel is zoned resource conservation 80 units per acre with a design control overlay and site plan review overlay. The proposed project involves a final map amendment and the construction of a single-family dwelling with an attached garage and associated site improvements, including 1,830 cubic yards of cut and 810 cubic yards of fill. In 1998, the Phase A final map for the Santa Lucia Preserve was recorded depicting locations of homeland boundaries and openland boundaries for each of the 254 residential lots created by the subdivision. The subject property is identified as Lot 38 of the Santa Lucia Preserve Phase A. The Phase A final map depicts the subject property as having a 1.4 acre homeland boundary, shown here in blue, where future development was intended to be constructed. As shown on the top left image, the subject property's Home 1 boundary is entirely forested. Although Lot 38's Home 1 boundary is entirely forested, no tree removal was allocated or previously analyzed for this lot. As shown on the bottom right image, the area just east of the Home 1 boundary, currently within an conservation easement, is not constrained by protected oak trees or slopes in excess of 30%. The applicant had originally designed a single-family dwelling within the existing 1.4-acre Home 1 boundary. This design and siting of the residence, as shown on the left, required the removal of 31 protected oak trees. In its current configuration, the existing Home 1 boundary could not be developed without removing numerous protected trees, and thus does not better meet the forest resource policies and goals of the 2010 General Plan or the county zoning ordinance. To avoid the removal of protected oaks, as encouraged by Greater Monterey Peninsula Policy GM 3.5, the applicant seeks to amend the Santa Lucia Preserve Phase A final map to adjust and reconfigure the Home 1 boundary of Lot 38 to allow siting of the proposed residence in a portion of the property that is not encumbered by protected oaks. As proposed, the Home 1 boundary would be reconfigured and shifted east while continuing to be 1.4 acres in size. This is shown on the right image. The remaining portions of Lot 38 would be placed in an amended conservation easement. As proposed, developing the reconfigured Home 1 boundary with the 6,330 square foot single-family dwelling would save 31 protected oak trees, 15 of which are landmark trees. The proposed Home 1 boundary adjustment would also protect habitats of migratory raptors and potentially sensitive species that occupy the adjacent oak woodland. Therefore, the proposed map amendment results in a superior Home 1 boundary configuration that better meets the goals and policies of the 2010 General Plan, specifically those protecting natural resources. The Board of Supervisors is the appropriate authority to consider the proposed final map. Therefore, staff is seeking the Planning Commission's recommendation on the proposed final map amendment and associated combined development permit for the proposed single-family dwelling. The project also involves the construction of a 5,441 square foot single-family dwelling with an attached 889 square foot garage, a 407 square foot covered porch, and associated site improvements. The proposed development complies with all applicable development standards of Title 21 and the Comprehensive Development Plan for the Santa Lucia Preserve. The open, multi-level classic ranch architectural style incorporates natural mixed materials with modern design components. Colors and materials consist of dark brown shiplap and earthy toned stone exteriors, non-reflective dark metal seam roofing, and metal-clad windows and doors. The proposed structure is consistent with the residential character and will not detract from the surrounding environment. The proposed development is not visible from any common public viewing area and will be situated behind mature oak trees to minimize its visibility within the Santa Lucia Preserve. The Santa Lucia Preserve final map included an environmental impact report that was certified by the Board of Supervisors on February 6, 1996. To reflect the changes proposed by this project, county staff prepared an addendum pursuant to CEQA Guidelines Sections 15164. As proposed, adjusting the subject lot's Home 1 boundary to avoid impacting forest resources while continuing to allow residential development and protect other sensitive resources better serves the intention of the Home 1 boundary's purpose. Based on the prepared technical reports and staff's review of the application materials, the proposed Home 1 boundary and subsequent residential development will not result in any new significant environmental impacts. Although there is new information regarding 3 wildlife species that were evaluated in the EIR, no impacts to these species are anticipated, and therefore the new information does not result in new or more severe environmental impacts. Therefore, there are no substantial changes in the project, no substantial changes in the circumstances, and no new information of substantial importance, which would require major revisions to the EIR due to the involvement of new significant environmental impacts or the increase in severity of previously identified impacts. Prior to this hearing, staff received correspondence from the applicant's agent requesting that the draft resolution be revised to include reference to a safety element policy and to correct typos. Staff has considered the request and recommends the Planning Commission make the revision shown on this slide. With those changes, staff recommends the Planning Commission recommend that the Board of Supervisors consider the prepared addendum together with the certified EIR pursuant to CEQA guideline sections 15164, approve the final map amendment, and approve the construction of a single-family dwelling and associated site improvements. This concludes staff's presentation. Staff is available for questions.
Thank you. With that, we'll bring it back to the commission for any questions from the commissioners. Commissioner Deal?
Thank you. Just one. Ms. Jensen, I know we just received the letter from the applicant's representative yesterday, and I didn't have a chance when you were going through it. Are there any recommendations in that letter that staff did not find that were appropriate to include?
No, I did not.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners? With that, we will go ahead and open a public hearing and ask the agent or the owner to come to the mic and state your name and make your presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Gonzalez and members of the commission. My name is Joel Panzer with Maureen Ruck Planning Consultants. Here this morning representing Richard and Nancy Griffith Trust, the property owners applicants. It's my understanding that Mr. Griffith is attending via Zoom and he may have comments after I conclude. The project is described by staff is to relocate the building envelope from a heavily wooded area into an open field, primarily to save trees. There's the fire safety element or consideration as well. In the staff report and in the commission packet, there's a copy of the biological report that indicates there's no issues with that meadow. Historically, the property from the 1860s has been used for cattle grazing, and this was the core area for that, so that's a heavily disturbed field. I was on the development team for the Santa Lucia Preserve back in the 1990s moving forward. And the design philosophy back then was to tuck homes into trees so that when you came onto the property, for all intents and purposes, it looked like the historic cattle ranch. And as we've seen the fire regime change in California over the years, it's another consideration. So I think by doing this, not only would more trees be protected, but then the house itself is placed in a field, and that could be mowed, and it just provides more protection for that residence. So I appreciate staff's consideration for referencing that fire safety from the safety element, the general plan policy. And I appreciate the comment or the question about the letter. So it was just some errata, more typos, I think, as staff has described it. So on behalf of the Griffiths, we support the staff recommendation for the CEQA component, the homeland revision in terms of the final map amendment, and the administrative and design approval for the residents. The Santa Lucia Preserve Design Review Board has approved that project in terms of siting, location, design, and materials. I believe there's a letter in the agenda packet referencing that. And we're here to answer any questions. As I noted before, Mr. Griffith is here. Because the project also requires a swap of conservation easements with the Santa Lucia Conservancy, I would also note that Mr. Jamison Watts, the Executive Director of the Santa Lucia Conservancy, is present today. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation. We ask for your support as recommended by staff. Thank you.
Thank you. You said somebody else might be via Zoom. Or are they part of the presentation?
I believe Mr. Griffith, the property owner, is attending via Zoom. I do not know whether or not he has comments, and Mr. Watts may or may not comment when you open to public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. They do, then this would be the time to do it.
Mr. Griffith, you are unmuted, so you are able to speak if you'd like.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, I do not have any additional comments to add.
Okay, thank you. And you are part of the team also?
Yes, I am. Good morning, commissioners, and hello, staff. My name is Jameson Watts. I'm the executive director of the Santa Lucia Conservancy. We have been involved since the beginning of this process. Any type of amendment to any conservation easement that we hold on the Santa Lucia Preserve requires Conservancy approval and concept before it goes through the county process, of course. Just a little bit about the Conservancy. We were founded as a condition of approval for the project in 1995. Of the 20,000 acres that the preserve is composed of, the Conservancy owns 10,000 acres in fee simple title, and we hold conservation easements on another 8,000 acres up there. So 90% of the 20,000 acre preserve is either owned or co-managed by the Conservancy in partnership with the landowners there. I think staff did an excellent job in presenting the facts of this project. Just a couple things to reiterate. The Conservancy supports the protection of 31 oak trees as a result of this project, 15 of which are landmark oaks. Moving the building envelope into the ruderal grasslands to the east, as has been described, will not negatively impact any sensitive natural resources. Moving the building envelope will also continue to uphold the terms and conditions of the easement. And so for those reasons, the Conservancy approves this project and supports it unequivocally. So any questions for me? Okay. Nice to see you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I guess with that, if there are no other members of the team, we're going to go ahead and open it to the public that's in the chamber. So anybody here that is in the chamber, you're welcome to come, and you have about 3 minutes to come and make your presentation. Okay, seeing none, is there anybody in Zoom or with any emails that might want?
Oops, sorry, Chair. There are no additional emails and no hands up on Zoom.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'll bring it back to staff if there are any clarifications or additions.
Not at this time. Thank you.
Now we bring it back to the commission to see if there are any questions, additions, actions. Commissioner Monsalve.
Thank you, Chair Gonzalez. I just wanted to review or confirm that the comments in the letter from Mr. Panzer's agency state some corrections that need to go into the conditions or the findings. And I wanted to confirm whether or not those were specifically made because they're not in our copy.
That's correct, Commissioner Monsalve. They, I can show the screen or the slide again, but revisions have been made to the draft resolution to compatible with Mr. Panzer's recommendations.
Thank you so much.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Hartzell?
This is maybe a question for the applicant or Mr. Panzer. Is there any other reason why the home was originally sited in the treed forested area other than that was the policy of the board at the time?
It was the development philosophy at the time, and that's the project is also in the core area of the Santa Lucia Preserve. So the thinking was if you tuck things into the trees, that big open meadow field, it sort of would retain the visual character of the historic property. And as I mentioned, with changes in California and fire hazards, et cetera, and with the thinking about trees, as Ms. Jensen noted, there's no allocation. But I think it was more the visual presence of the historic core is why that was thought to be a good idea back in the day.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Deal?
Thank you. Ms. Jensen, is the revision to the homeland boundary an action that we have to recommend to the board, or what is the procedure on that? Just the final map amendment is something we adopt, or what happens?
Pursuant to Title 19, final map amendments require 2 hearing bodies review. So the first would be the Planning Commission's recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, who would take final action on the final map amendment and would ultimately, should they approve it, would record the document. Because the proposed residence is to be cited in that proposed or adjusted homeland boundary, the board is also the appropriate authority to make a final action on the proposed single-family dwelling. So simply today, the staff is seeking the Planning Commission's recommendation on the final map amendment and the combined development permit for the single-family dwelling.
So the action today would be for the Planning Commission to recommend to the board?
That's correct.
Okay, that's not what's reflected in the recommendation. That's why I wanted to check. Mr. Chair, I'd like to just follow up with that if there's not further discussion. I'd like to go ahead and make a motion at this time to, for the Planning Commission to recommend to the Board of Supervisors that they consider the addendum to the Environmental Impact Report for the Santa Lucia Preserve and adopt the combined development permit as modified in today's hearing. I also just want to say thank you for saving the landmark oaks.
And so, for the record, or who's the second? Oh, do you have a question, Commissioner?
Second it.
Oh, okay. Commissioner Deal made the motion, and seconded by Commissioner Shaw, for the record. Any other questions? If not, all those in favor of the motion so indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. From here, we go on to the next item. We go to the next item on the agenda, PLN 210306, which is the Carmel Self-Storage LLC. And so with that, staff will make a report on this particular item, which is on the agenda. Staff, please.
Good morning, Commissioners. Technicians, would you please share the PowerPoint? Thank you. All right, so I am Mary Israel, the planner for this project, which was continued from the October 30th hearing for additional information and a redesign. This cover slide shows a regional map with the project site called out. As you can see, the project is in the Carmel Valley area and fronts Carmel Valley Road. It is therefore in the Carmel Valley Master Plan area. The property is located at the terminus of Center Street near the corner with Berwick Drive and is zoned heavy commercial with design, site plan, residential allocation zoning overlays. The project proposes construction of an approximately 68,760 square foot, 2-story self-storage facility with an office and bathroom totaling 5 buildings. It includes removal of 1 protected oak tree, and it adds an on-site wastewater treatment system, or OWTS, and associated drainage control, driveway fencing improvements. The Planning Commission reviewed the application for this self-storage facility on October 30th, 2024, as I mentioned, and after receiving staff and public input and discussing the pros and cons of the project, the Planning Commissioners continued the item to a future date with request for the project to be rearranged to safeguard the existing social trail. The Commissioners also expressed the project parking and access easement to the neighboring property should have greater clearance, and generally the Planning Commission expressed concern with the size and bulkiness of the proposed project. This is the previous design for Building A and the rear part of the lot, the southernmost building. And this is that area of the project as redesigned. In response to the continuance request, the applicant created a walking access area between the top of slope and Building A with a minimum width of 6 feet and at other places wider than 10 feet by reducing the footprint of Building A by approximately 5 feet on the west and another 5 feet on the south, and amending the angle of the building away from the south property line. The change in size and orientation of Building A also made more room for the entrance access easement area, as shown in the clip of the plans on the right side of this slide. Upon Planning Commissioner input on the proposed project, the applicant reduced the total height of Building A from 35 feet to 28 feet 4 inches above average natural grade. No other changes were made to the project since October 30th, 2024. Staff notes that the first submittal in the series of application plan sets showed Building E as shown in red on this slide, and in response to public input at the Land Use Advisory Committee and staff review, the bulk of Building E was reduced. Buildings A and E are the ones which face public roads. Building E faces Carmel Valley Road, so it was of greater concern. The roof line of most of the building was 28 feet 4 inches from average natural grade, and now, as shown in the section of the slide on the lower part in green, the current elevation, most of that roof is lowered to 26 feet 7 inches, so the highest point of the building is now the peak of the barn-like facade. Although maximum height from average natural grade for the structure is still formally the same, most of the building is significantly reduced in size. But again, staff notes that this change was made prior to the October 30th review by the Planning Commission and informed the aesthetics chapter of the initial study. Site coverage for heavy commercial parcels is 50%. The project as proposed has a site coverage of 35,620 square feet, which is 39.3%. The previous design had a site coverage of 38,670 square feet, which was 42.7%. So the project redesign includes a reduction in overall site coverage. The updated site plan shown on this slide indicates that Building A, the southernmost building, is smaller and moved to accommodate a more flat area for public passage through the parcel, and the area which allows the social trail is illustrated throughout the plans with red hatching. A painted crosswalk is proposed on site to connect the trail to the sidewalk via a walkway at the front of Building A. As you can see, this change in design also reduced the parking area by 1 space, but it still meets the minimum parking requirements for self-storage in Title 21. So here is our views from public roads with and without the project. The photograph at the top is from Google Earth from Center Street at Berwick Drive, and the bottom image is from the project's updated 3D renderings of the proposal. We're now looking at a photograph taken by staff from Carmel Valley Road, looking south into the parcel, and then an approximate 3D, same position 3D rendering that was provided in the current plan set. Staff does note that there's been an ongoing problem with the staking and flagging of the site, such that they re-erect it and someone is going in and vandalizing and cutting it down. And that's happened several times. So if you did go by the site to look at the staking and flagging and didn't see it up, that was the occurrence. Again, it's down. So I think also the applicant will speak to that in this hearing. You've seen this before in the previous hearing, but this is a image from Google Earth helping to illustrate the built-out quality of the immediate neighborhood. The subject parcel is the empty triangle that has brown grass. Immediately to the east is a large self-storage facility. To the west is a bank and various two-story commercial structures. There is one vacant lot between Berwick Drive and the subject parcel. This slide shows the proposed elevations for Building A, the building which would be seen from Center Street. The facade is designed to be barn-like, and the office section is pedestrian scaled. Colors and materials are also shown. They include grays, sage green, and beige painted metal and concrete. The fence would be black metal. Now we're looking at the northmost building, as already shown in several photos before in 3D renderings, which hopefully will make up for the lack of consistent staking and flagging. And the colors and materials are similar. The facade is designed to be barn-like and blend with the natural colors of the landscape and the valley. I just wanted to briefly touch on the location being highly sensitive for archaeological resources. Phase 1 and Phase 2 reports were prepared, and both were negative for resources. However, the initial study did find that a tribal cultural monitor would be required. And there's the removal of one protected live oak tree. The project proponent anticipates to plant more than is required for replacement in Title 21 as part of their landscape plan. And those oak trees would be planted so that they would add additional vegetative screening for views from Carmel Valley Road. Infrastructure for the proposed project was reviewed by Environmental Services, who found the design sufficient to properly contain most stormwater runoff and move it from the hardscape toward the public road. So they are available in this hearing to discuss flooding events and how they might affect the area, including the roadways. And some rainfall would be allowed to percolate naturally down into the undeveloped land to the south end of the property, whereas most of it would be contained on site in the stormwater basin that is shown at the front of Building E. The project includes use permit pursuant to Title 21. Section 2164-130D1 requires use permit for development within 200 feet of Carmel River top of bank. This clip from the updated plan shows a green line for the 200-foot distance from top of bank. FEMA flood zone, designated AE, present on the parcel is only where the plans represent it in that lower corner as indicated by the blue arrow. It is emphasized with a dashed red line, and the gray colored area under it is biologically identified or riparian habitat identified by a biologist. The next red line indicates the edge of a between zone, and then the area above that dashed line is the 500-year flood zone, which FEMA area calls unshaded X. This area is considered minimal flood hazard, and all of the project actual development is within that 500-year flood zone. So the use permit has to do just with that green line that is shown in this updated plan set, and hopefully this responded in full to the request for more clarity and discernment between the two. I think there's an alarm going off. Pardon me.
And while staff addresses that, I did just want to note that there was an errata memo that was distributed yesterday afternoon that addressed the incorrect in the packet that distributed indicating a use permit for 200 feet within the floodplain. It was actually the top of bank, which is reflected in Ms. Israel's presentation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Beretti. Moving on, the subject property, and apologies for the alarm. The subject property contains a 60-foot driveway and utility easement at the southwest corner of the parcel. In 2022, a parking and drive easement and maintenance agreement was executed and recorded between the owner and the subject parcel and the owners of the neighboring parcel, APN 169131025. It gives the owner of the subject parcel exclusive rights to access and park vehicles on a certain portion of that 60-foot easement. There is sufficient access allowed for the owner of the neighboring parcel to drive into their parcel. This includes capacity for minimum width required for construction of an access road should this neighboring parcel follow through on the proposed housing element opportunity site that's identified in the draft element cycle. As amended since the October 30th hearing, the project has no potential to conflict with that existing access easement serving the neighboring lot. And a utility easement also exists on the lane of driveway along the western property line. The project as proposed does not conflict with any utility company access. County did prepare an initial study to analyze potential environmental impacts associated with the project. Potential impacts were identified for biological resources, cultural and tribal cultural resources. No protected amphibians, reptiles, or species of special concern were identified on the parcel during a biological study. However, there is potential upland habitat for 2 protected amphibians and the western pond turtle. The potential biological impacts would be mitigated to less than significant level through the mitigation measures Bio 1 through Bio 5. We previously discussed the archaeological and tribal cultural monitoring that would mitigate potential cultural and tribal cultural impacts to less than significant. And 2 letters were received on the initial study. One from the applicant requested various clarifications and corrections to typos. The other clarification had to do with, was answered by removing a statement that was tied to an older study. And so it is this, staff does recommend adoption of the red line version of the initial study as shown in an exhibit, and can answer any other further questions about that. Public comment continued to come in on this project since the last hearing. This included approximately 6 and now I think 8 letters from neighbors which are against the project, and 3 letters from Carmel Valley Association. And there was also 1 letter from a neighbor, a new letter from another neighbor in favor of the project. There are concerns for aesthetics, traffic, and pedestrian safety from the public. Staff can go into any response to those as the will of the commissioners. So this brings us to the recommendation by staff. Staff does recommend that the Planning Commission adopt a mitigated negative declaration pursuant to Section 15074 of CEQA guidelines with the errata edits as disclosed, and approve this combined development permit that consists of the reduced project 5-building, 2-story self-storage facility with office and bathroom, the administrative and permit and design approval for development on the site in these colors, and the use permit to allow development within 200 feet of Carmel River top of bank. And I put that asterisk just to remind you of that memo, but Ms. Beretti has already clarified that the top of the resolution would also match the bottom of the resolution, which was corrected. Apologies for the oversight. And lastly, staff recommends you adopt the condition compliance and mitigation monitoring and reporting plan. This concludes staff's presentation. Staff is available for questions and also notes that there are 2 presentations planned by the applicant, one from the architect and another one from Mr. Lombardo. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we bring it back to the commission for questions. Commissioner Deal.
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation. Couple of things. One of them is that the renderings and planting shows foundation planting. It looks like trellising and bushes. Is that still allowable under the current fire rules? I just don't know. This is an informational question. I just got the note that said you couldn't have anything within 5 feet. So I don't know what that means. Because if we're counting on that, then we should know whether it's allowable or not.
So staff is also just catching up with the new fire regulations and does the review of the landscaping plan as part of the review of the construction permit. And at that time, I do plan to meet with the fire district to go over the regulations and make sure that it is compliant. They also do the review at the time of construction permit of all of the development. So I don't have a direct answer, and I apologize. But as it's proposed right now, it's still just draft, and that's not something that's approved by the Planning Commission.
Through the chair, we're being asked for a design review. That means we want to know what it's going to look like. That means that the plantings have to be something that we can count upon so that we know what it's going to look like. In the past, we have had plans that show what the landscape plan will look like. And in this case, this is a question that I don't think is determinate, but it's certainly to be told by staff that we aren't going to be able to know what it looks like until after we approve the project is unacceptable to me. So I want to know how we're going to resolve that difficulty.
Apologies. I wasn't trying to say that you wouldn't know what it looks like, but more that the proposed number of trees and bushes may need to be amended to move away from the building, but staff will still be looking for adequate screening as proposed in this draft.
Ms. Moretti, did you want to weigh in?
Madam Secretary?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to note that what's being referred to, the zone 0 from 0 to 5 feet, those are not currently effective, though we do know that the state is addressing new regulations. And I think that we could ask, it's going through public workshops at the time, and I think that what we can do is perhaps staff, if you could just review the language for the condition of approval for the landscaping plan to ensure that it's clear that the intended outcome, even if it needs to shift, that it achieves the intended outcome. So I've not looked at that language, but perhaps we can just double check to make sure that's adequate to address the potential for a change if things need to move off buildings.
Thank you. I very much appreciate that. If I can follow up, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would definitely want to make sure that we have some indication that what we are looking at is what we are going to get in the end, and it's not going to be modified outside of the hearing process. So I really appreciate that. My next question is a statement that I heard in the staff report that kind of puzzled me. We had some letters regarding drainage, and I thought I heard that the staff understood, and this is the Public Works folks, I think, that the drainage would be, some would be percolated and some would be directed towards public roads. And I thought we also received some comments of concern about the drainage on the public roads. And I'd appreciate some clarification about the drainage.
Certainly, thank you. Through the chair. I was in regular contact with Public Works about this issue, and they did a site visit and looked at the conditions at Center Street and Berwick Drive. The Public Works Road District Superintendent stated that tree roots at the corner have uplifted the gutter, and this is causing some backup of drainage. Also, a utility trench is high and creating some backup that comes from the farthest end of Berwick Drive. So they are in the process of contacting the neighbors that live right on that corner to look at how to work on the trees, and acacia, possibly an oak tree, would need to be moved to correct the issue. And as far as stormwater control on site, does have a design that is intended to control all stormwater. And then the new plan set, although I didn't highlight it in my presentation, but I believe they're highlighting in their presentation, the new plan set for the civils. You can see that they added an additional gutter right at the driveway that crosses the entrance before Center Street to direct any of that surface water down the slope within their property again.
Thank you. One more, Mr. Chair, if I might.
You still have the floor.
Thank you. I look forward to the applicant's discussion of the drainage, given that we've received on the record some photographs of drainage issues that we wouldn't want to exacerbate until the solution is in place. And then finally, the issue that has received a lot of airtime, could you put up the exhibits that really explain how the pathway is going to work, including how it's going to connect with the public road system outside of the front entrance to the site?
Technicians, would you please share the PowerPoint that was staff's PowerPoint, item 2? There we go. Sorry for the delay. Okay, so if it's clear enough in this slide, this is slide number 5 in the deck. I believe the intention is to allow free access from Center Street across the access easement area and then onto this unblocked section that's marked with red hatching. They did draw into their plan set, the applicant drew in the plan set this crosswalk just to add to pedestrian safety, but that's not like a requirement. They could go from the existing sidewalk on Center Street across the area. There's no blocking fencing in this corner, and then cross the parcel on their way out to Robinson Canyon Road as they have done on a social trail.
So my understanding is they're proposing to not impede traffic, but there's going to be no formal recognition of that trail where it goes from their end of their buildings to the existing public street, which remind me that street does have a sidewalk?
Through the chair, yes, it does have a sidewalk on the side that's indicated right with this corner onto their proposed crosshatched area. And they would not block passage from there onward in any way.
And they won't have any issue with people on their walkway walking right in front of their fence there in front of the parking, because that seems to me to be leading people to a walkway that looks like a walkway right in front of the building and then across where this crosshatched area is connecting to the sidewalk, otherwise diagonally across their parking lot. But that wouldn't be an issue for the applicant? They've said that's okay?
From what I understand, that's not an issue for the applicant through the chair, and that is not a fence. It looks like a fence, but it's not a fence in that little triangle area. It's just a curb curtain.
I'm sorry, I didn't follow that. Is there any way for you to use a cursor and to outline where the fence is? Or the pictures. Pictures are excellent. And a picture that includes beyond the site is helpful for us here.
Okay. Hopefully this one is a little clearer. It has because this one is a sheet taken from the civils. And so it has the indication of the gutter, as we discussed earlier, across the front. There's some landscaping in the upper corner, and then there's a curb that's shown with the squiggle line that does not have a fence. So public could come from the existing sidewalk on the far side of Center Street. If they wished to go within this crosswalk area, they could, or they could just walk straight across to over here and walk right onto the flat area, and it's not being impeded. There was a discussion with Public Works and HCD and the applicant about the potential for an easement, and Public Works would be the recipient of such easement, and they were not at all interested. They did not feel that they could maintain it long-term, and so it wasn't necessarily on the table for this.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand what the recorded agreement about what would happen with the pathway is. Could you just outline for me really carefully, or somehow, some way so I can understand it, where the fencing is. There's a lot of lines on here. I'm just trying to get clear in my head where the fencing that would separate the facility from the rest of the world runs on this drawing.
Through the chair, back to slide 5, there's an electric gate controlling access to the buildings that's erected here, would be erected at the front of building B. And then there's a don't have it showing well enough on this sheet, sorry, but there should be a fence before building A's entrance between building A and B.
Okay, that's still not clear to me, but I'm sure the applicant can help with that.
Thank you.
And staff is comfortable that all of these understandings we're talking about are appropriately recorded in the documents before us, so that when 20 years from now we come back and look at them, everybody will know what was on offer, even without the easement.
Through the chair, yes, except for those errata edits, staff is comfortable with everything that's in the resolution and the conditions of approval.
That wasn't the question. The question was, do you believe that the resolution adequately records the agreement with respect to the pathway? It's an informal pathway, so we don't have an easement. So we come back for another hearing some other day on some other project. We want to know what that agreement was. Is staff comfortable that that irregular non-easement agreement is memorialized in the documents so that the people down the road will know what they were?
Staff is comfortable, but through the chair, if the commission would rather formalize this with an additional condition that states it very plainly, staff could add a condition to the resolution.
It's going to be something that's going to make a difference in the decision, so I think it should be very clearly recorded, and I would certainly stand ready to understand what the agreement is, but it will be something that weighs heavily in my decision, so I want to make sure I know what exactly is on offer. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the indulgence.
Thank you. Commissioner Shaw?
Thank you. So looking again at those site plans, I don't understand. There's like a little gray box. I don't really understand if I'm walking on that path and I'm coming to Berwick Drive, what am I encountering? Because lower in the site plan, you can see that the narrowest part is 6 feet wide, but up in that kind of red dotted area by that squiggly curb, it's much narrower. So I'm just like, when you're walking or pushing a bike or pushing a stroller, what are you encountering at that entrance to Berwick Drive? Right where you see there's like that little gray box in the top left-hand corner. It gets really narrow right there, and there's like this 90-degree corner. How does one navigate this? I would love to see a picture of what that would look like when it's constructed, when you're walking up to it. That's my first concern. And my second concern is the impact of this building on that dirt path just over time during construction. What is the agreement to maintain that at minimum in the condition that it's in now, that it looks to me to be fairly level, easy to navigate? But once you've had all this construction happening, is that going to be, is it, we're going to make sure that this is still back to that baseline, or is it, are they going to maintain this with all that runoff off of that building, all that metal and all the water sheeting off onto that 6 foot wide narrowest point? What are we asking them to do?
Thank you. Through the chair, in the last hearing, the applicant did commit to the hydroseeding of the whole natural area on the hillside and along the top, and maintaining a flat grassy area for public access. And as far as the way that the corner will look, from what I understand, there's a 5 foot area right next to the red hatched area that is protected with painting of the concrete so that there can't be anyone parking there. So that would add an additional 5 feet on the other side of the curb to allow people to pass through on foot or with their bicycles. I think in terms of how it would look for myself as a bicyclist, if I were going through there, I would dismount upon entering and then walk my bike through the parking area and up over that curb and then maybe ride or maybe walk it from there to the other side. Does that answer all the questions through the chair?
Thank you. And I have one more, not a question, but a statement in regards to what Commissioner Dale was speaking on with the planting. And I think it is kind of determinate for me because we're depending on that trellising to kind of break up that visual bulk that's happening. And so if that's not there, then it's even just more of a giant wall. I actually have one more question, please. Do you have any kind of overlay to show the reduction in height? And to clarify, there was no further reduction in height. This height reduction was what we saw at the last hearing, correct? And two, it's really hard to imagine looking at two separate pictures and the reference lines are not the same. What exactly was reduced? Yes, thank you.
Through the chair, yes, building A was reduced from 35 feet to 28 feet 4 inches since the October 30th hearing on this project in direct response to planning commissioner comments.
Through the chair, I had asked about the consideration of having it be 1 story, that much of a reduction on like the outer edges to be similar to the other storage facility, and that was, I think, at the last hearing or the one before that. So this is just kind of hasn't changed in response to that, correct?
Through the chair, the applicant made several changes in response. They did not reduce by a flight. And staff, as well as the applicant, did listen very carefully to the instructions that were given by the commissioners. And apologies, staff did not perceive that was a firm expectation of a reduction in 1 flight.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gomez?
Back to we got correspondence from Tracy Ball. In her correspondence, she included several photos of the flooding area right in front of the building, the proposed building. I want to make sure that this development doesn't create any additional problems, and that if it's possible, it can help reduce the flooding in that area. Would the current proposed project do that?
Through the chair, the proposed project for the subject parcel would not reduce the flooding that is in that area and caused by other neighbors. However, by design, it would not worsen the problem. And our environmental services staff that reviewed this project are available within the hearing to discuss how the stormwater controls are set up to maintain all of the stormwater on site.
Could we have them respond to this, please? It looks like there appears to be a swell there in the middle. I'm not sure if there's a drain there that's not functioning correctly. Maybe some of the flooding is caused by that clogged drainage. I can't tell, but it'd be good to have them address that too in the photo.
Yeah, and I think we have both environmental services staff who can speak to stormwater generated and the plan from the site, and then we also have our development services staff who could speak to, just to clarify if needed, the kind of localized flooding. So with that, I'm looking, and Armando Fernandez has his hand up, and perhaps he can speak first.
Yes, good morning, commissioners, Chair Gonzalez. So we reach out to the superintendent for public works, and they are aware that there is an issue at this particular intersection. What is happening is that there's a pine, an older pine tree and an oak tree at the very corner there that actually lifted the gutter, which is backing up, causing backup of the water. My understanding as well is that Public Works has been trying to fix the issue, but when they try to go into the site and remove the trees, which is what they are proposing, they encounter that the community does not want those trees to be removed. So they are aware, they try to come up with a solution, but they haven't been able to resolve it at this point.
Commissioner Hartzell.
Thank you. Through the chair. I just want to clarify could you put the red and white hatching back up of the trail? So I was out here at this site yesterday, and as it's currently staked and flagged, the stakes and flags are well over the current well-worn footpath that you can see in the overhead kind of Google image. And so to walk on this hatching, you need to go on some slightly uneven ground and in some taller grass. I'm wondering if there's anything about that circumstance, the kind of chunky soil or grass that can be contained in a condition that will make it friendly to walk into. I've heard my other commissioners kind of mention that, and that was my experience there. It's kind of I have pictures on my phone. It's like pretty close. There's a post and then a stake, and it's a pretty narrow area, tall grass, not sloped like crazy, but chunky. So just want to talk about how to make that work.
Certainly, through the chair. So what I'm hearing in the first part of that question was that this proposed trail walkway alignment doesn't necessarily match up to the existing social trail, and that is correct. The existing social trail, as we looked at in the previous hearing, sort of just cuts straight off of the edge of Center Street and rambles through what it is proposed as Building A's area. So they are proposing to retain a free passage for the public, but not memorialize that particular trail alignment. And the area that is now in this red hatched area would be, would definitely through the process of construction, lose all the tall grass and then be rehydroseeded. And the question of having a condition of approval that would memorialize that would stay maintained. I believe that we are moving toward that right now through this discussion to add a condition of approval that, or maybe some details in the landscape section to make sure that the landscaping condition of approval both memorializes that the Planning Commission expects to see good visual screening from the final landscape plan, even if the Zone 0 is institutionalized by the time that the construction permit comes forward. And then also we can add a sentence that states that area shown in the plan set with the red cross hatching will be maintained with mowed grass level so that it is passable to all people passing through within the life of the project.
One more. Thank you. And through the chair, just wanting to identify that behind Building A, I think there's been I'm a little confused. I've heard fence, I've heard building, but my understanding is that people would be walking right alongside Building A and that there's no fence between Building A and the trail. Is that accurate?
Through the chair, yes, that is accurate.
And so what is now sort of an area that you can walk through and be seen from down the street will be kind of a blocked off area. I walked behind it and I was like, oh, maybe if there was a tall building here, I would feel a little unsafe. Nothing we can do about that necessarily, but just wanting to make sure that that's identified and acknowledged. Yeah, great. And then when we were talking about drainage, maybe this is a question for the applicant, but I heard that there's a gutter happening on Berwick, and that there's drainage issues there. Obviously, we've talked about it a bunch, but wondering, is the gutter on the ground? And if so, how does all of that interact, or how is it anticipated?
Through the chair, I think we would be best served by speaking with Armando again, if he's listening in, because I probably don't have the right terminology. But just as introduction, yes, it is not an underground gutter. It's basically just a depression along the side of the road, and it runs the full length of Berwick Drive and then joins into a drainage pipe. So that by design for the whole of Berwick Manor had been, roadways of rural character without heavy improvements. And so it's just kind of a surface drainage. And that's why it's particularly sensitive to uplift by trees and hedgerows. And
just noting that that's, or maybe Armando can tell us, but just noting that that's planning to go into the drainage for Berwick. It's not going into the pond that's anticipated at the front of this development.
Correct. All the photos that came in from Ms. Ball and this recent letter are of the Berwick Drive gutter, and the proposed project will not interact with that gutter.
I see a hand up from our public. Can we hear? Great.
Yes, Commissioner, this is Armando Fernandez. I just would like to add to the comment that Ms. Israel made. What is happening is that there is an existing curve and gutter around that return that is intended to be the low spot, so water will flow through. There's no inlet, just to be clear, no inlet. But there's two older trees, one pine tree and one oak tree that's located at the very corner there and has uplifted the curving gutter. And that is actually causing a backup into the valley gutter. And that's why we have ponding there. As I mentioned before, we reach out to the Public Works team, and their solution for that is to remove those trees, but they have encountered opposition from the neighbors, and they haven't been able to resolve that issue at the moment. And just to add as well is that the project itself is self-contained from a drainage standpoint. What that means is that all of the runoff that is being created by the additional impervious surfaces for the project is being contained on site, transferred to the north to a basin that's located in the north, and it's infiltrated and retained, and the rest is diverted via a storm drain system to the south parcel. So the project itself is not contributing stormwater runoff to Center Street.
And if I may, just through the chair, I'm trying to get via Zoom to share just an image of that Berwick intake so people can track a little better what the conversation is. There it is. So if I may, just really quickly, I just wanted to orient on this again as we're discussing. So this here, these are the part of the trees. This is Center Street and the drainage that is blocked. And then this is that kind of surface drainage that comes off of Berwick to Center Street. And then this is the project site where Mr. Fernandez just explained that that surface drainage is not directed towards Berwick and Center Street. It is directed towards the pond at the front end, with some that goes off to the natural area and percolates behind Building A, but does not come this direction towards Center. So hopefully that helps with the visual.
Thanks. That answers my question.
Commissioner Getzelman?
Thank you, Chair. So, Mary, my understanding is this area is zoned heavy industrial. Is that correct?
Through the chair, this is heavy commercial.
Heavy commercial. Okay, thank you. And it looks like from that slide we just saw that there are other two-story commercial neighbors in this area. Is that true? So this would not be the only tall building in a huge area, right? In fact, it looks like one of the neighbors immediately adjacent is two-story.
Through the chair, correct. That is correct. The immediate neighboring building is two-story, and several of the buildings along Berwick Drive are two-story. And then on the other side of Berwick Drive is the Mid-Valley Shopping Center, which has several large structures of 2 stories.
Good, thank you. And then my final question is, you mentioned that there were 8 letters in opposition to the project from, quote, neighbors. Were those neighbors any of the commercial properties that are immediately around here or immediately adjacent to the project?
Through the chair, yes. One of the letters that came in is from a representative of the self-storage facility that's already constructed immediately to the west.
That's a surprise, yeah. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Shaw?
Thank you. He stated that some of the drainage is going to go behind Building A, and I'm wondering if we can see exactly where that's going to, because that's where the path is, right? So where exactly is that draining to? And 2, I'm looking at pictures and I'm looking at Google Earth, and I don't see any roots or uplifting there. And I'm wondering if there are any better pictures showing that. And one more thing while I'm on that. Are we unable to look at the impact on the road from construction traffic? Not so concerned about day-to-day traffic impacts on the road itself, the structure of the road, but I'm concerned with the heavy machinery. The pictures that were submitted by Mr. and Mrs. Kaufman, while it does show the standing water, I also noticed the condition of the road is degraded already, and my personal experience with heavy construction on a road similar to this is that it further degrades it quite rapidly. And I don't know if that's something that we can even begin to analyze the impacts, because I didn't see that in the MND.
Okay, so through the chair, apologies, I am just getting over a pretty bad case of the flu, so I might have missed the middle of that question section. So please correct me if I miss anything. We're looking at the photos and 3D rendering slide here, slide number 6, and I think this can help address the question about seeing some additional photographs of that corner and how the trees could be impacting and uplifting. Again, it's just speaking on behalf of Public Works. They went and investigated the site, and they also looked at additional photographs and said that the uplift would be just subtle enough underneath the line across the street, which is that surface gutter, so that it would cause a little bit of backflow. It's not a very deep gutter, and it doesn't have a very extreme gradient. So just a little bit of uplift under the gutter itself is causing that puddling that you see there, which gets worse when there's high rain events. And they are attempting to address that, but they have to address it by dealing with the private property owners who are in the corner there. Second question that I heard was having to do with traffic impacts during construction and those impacts on the road. So there's construction management plan that is required by the engineering services team. And, it discusses circulation and the number of trips, and a lot of that is intended to minimize the impacts on particular roads. So perhaps Mr. Fernandez would like to address how they could augment that to ensure, or he could explain how they normally deal with the after effects of construction impacts. I'm not actually personally familiar with that. Third question? Is that all?
Through the chair, sorry, yeah, I just totally stuffed them all together. Sorry. My other question was about that runoff from Building A that's being directed behind Building A, and where exactly is that going? Because to me, that's where the path is.
Through the chair. So unfortunately, I'm hearing that Catherine Day, who's supposed to be in this meeting, has got to be at the counter at the permit center and can't, as what was planned, discuss the stormwater controls. So planning staff will do their best. This slide shows DMA2, and correct, through the chair, Commissioner Shaw did identify from the last hearing, we discussed how stormwater that would inundate on that slope would continue to naturally percolate down the slope. And so there would be potentially a little bit of site drainage off that side. But again, this is just open ground, which is the highest level of percolation. So the design is such that it would just naturally be percolating. It would be like walking on the top of a hill anywhere. And all of the rest of the hardscape is angled. So building A and forward, all hardscape is angled so that the stormwater that hits hard surfaces there is moving toward the north side and up toward that stormwater basin.
Thank you.
I'm sorry?
Commissioner Shaw, I would be able to answer your question related to the payment if that's an appropriate time.
Yeah, Armando, if you could please speak specifically to how the Public Works Development Services incorporates in the condition for construction management plans or in standards for construction management plans addressing asphalt and paved road condition kind of protection during and impacts post construction due to heavy equipment.
Yeah, so the construction management plan by itself is generally more geared towards managing construction activity, construction noise, certain paths where we don't want trucks to drive. But in terms of looking at pavement conditions, we typically do not review the pavement conditions or do not set a condition of approval for a temporary condition. So yes, we're going to have truck traffic coming in and out, but it's a what we call a temporary condition. If this was a project where we had truck traffic permanently coming in and out, and we would know that the volume of truck trips is sufficient to degrade the payment, then we would enter or at least request a payment evaluation report to mitigate the potential for payment degradation. In this case, treated as a standard practice. We didn't request a payment analysis. However, during the construction time, our encroachments team or somebody in our team will be reviewing and taking a look at the payment conditions. And if they find anything that is damaged beyond normal wear and tear, then we would reach out to the applicant and make sure they correct that. But we do not have a condition of approval. It's not normal to do it in this cases where the truck trips would be temporary.
Chair?
Okay, Commissioner Mendoza.
Chair Gonzalez, actually, I think I'm going to wait for the applicant to speak. He'll probably going to answer a lot of my questions. So I think a lot of our questions will be answered, so that might be a good direction to go in. Thank you.
Just wanted to confirm with our staff, this won't make this flooding any worse on Center Street, would it? For the record. And secondly, just from my understanding of road and road conditions, it clearly having sitting water on the road for a long time damages the road. And so I'm quite surprised that Public Works doesn't deal with that issue as an emergency as opposed to getting permission.
Through the chair, if that question is for planning staff, HCD Environmental Services did a full review of this after the resubmittal of these plans since October 30th, and they said that they found that all the on-site stormwater would be maintained within the stormwater plan, would not be flowing onto Center Street.
Commissioner Deal?
Brief editorial comment that I'm very surprised that Public Works has only one way to solve a problem. They're usually pretty creative, and I would really like to understand why they come to a hard stop when they come to an obstruction in the neighborhood thoughts. That is not my experience with that normally very creative group in the county.
Commissioner Hartzell?
Just quickly for the record, I wanted to state that I just last night watched the hearing from October, so I'm all caught up and just letting everyone know.
Commissioner Monsalve?
Thank you, Chair Gonzalez. I wanted to make the same comment. I was waiting for the vote, but I will jump in now. And for the record, I watched the recording as well. Thank you.
Any other comments from the commission? Questions? With that, we're going to go ahead and open the public hearing, and Mr. Anthony Lombardo and associates will come and make their presentation. Thank you. Just please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Anthony Lombardo on behalf of the applicant and Commissioner Hartzell. Welcome. If we could switch, I'll address the commissioner's questions before I get to my PowerPoint. And I don't know how to switch on this new old school device. I'll start with Commissioner Deal's questions about the landscaping. Green one is lit.
Technicians, would you please share the applicant slideshow from beginning? I believe I've pulled it up. Okay. Oh, you have that. Never mind.
There we go. I think, yeah.
They're doing overhead first.
Yeah, I think I did. This wasn't part of my PowerPoint, but I want to address the questions. Question was first raised about the landscaping, which is this view that shows that trellising adjacent to the building, which wasn't actually planned to be attached to the building, but be adjacent to it. The actual landscape plan is this one, which, as you can see, completely screens the building. And the plan itself, Commissioner Deal's question was, what are we approving? There's the actual landscaping plan that was submitted by the applicant, and that includes the number of the screening trees, which you can see in the foreground here, the plant palette, which I will not even begin to try and pronounce the Latin names of all these things. But there is a plan to screen the view from Carmel Valley Road, which does not depend on vegetation being attached to it. And this is it. As you can see, it's principally large trees planted between Carmel Valley Road and the detention basin, which is the next topic of the runoff. Little different photograph of the area. The problem in question where the water sits, from the explanation of the Public Works Department, it appears that there must be a problem with the curbing in this area, or the street section in this area being uplifted by the vegetation in the corner of the public right-of-way, and the thus far unwillingness of the neighborhood to have that vegetation removed. That is a problem which I'm sure there must be some solution to, but it's not a problem that we are either creating or going to exacerbate. All of the runoff from the project site well, my PowerPoint might be a little better on this, but all of the runoff from the site is directed to the detention basin, which meets the requirements of county and state regulation, and the overflow is then directed down and discharged below the slope in this lower area, not towards any street. Also, there is no drainage coming off of Building A that will go on to the pathway that we're creating, and I think Commissioner Hartzell's suggestion was an excellent one. It should be made of some type of should be surfaced with a material that won't become muddy or uneven, something like a decomposed granite or pea gravel or something. And so the applicant has no issue with adding a condition that would require us to improve that pathway to make it usable and flat for them. The second question, it was about the pathway, was the connection to the front of the building, and the drawing, which is not obviously the construction drawing of the pathway, shows what looks like an area where the red cross hatching becomes quite narrow. That's narrow because it comes into the sidewalk. So I've got another slide I'll show you in a minute. It's full width all the way to the front of the building, all the way down the sidewalk, and all the way to the crosswalk. So it maintains that width of 6 to 10 feet, I can't remember exactly in the front, but it maintains that width throughout. It doesn't pinch down to 1 foot. It's just the red cross hatching doesn't illustrate it very well. The question about fencing, there is no fencing in the area of the pathway or of the front of the building, except as the entrance to the project site. So there's a fence across, oops, sorry. I can go this is a drawing that looks like it pinches down, the red pinches down. It actually doesn't do that. That's where it connects to the sidewalk, to the front of the building that connects to the sidewalk, going towards center, which then we're delineating a crosswalk across our driveway, which has a gate here, and then the sidewalk on the north side of center, north side of center that connects to the shopping center. So there's a fence here, a gate here, a fence along this boundary, and a fence along this boundary that ends at the Building A. So there is no fencing along the south side of Building A whatsoever. Commissioner Getzelman had asked a question about letters of support and there were actually 3 letters of support. One from a person I'm going to mention in a moment. The other, they're actually the nearest commercial building did write a letter of support. The one on Center Street. So there were actually 3 letters of support. So if we can now switch to the PowerPoint. So as staff discussed, the zoning district allows a height of 35 feet. The principal height of the buildings is 22 feet to the top of the roofs, with some areas that there are mechanical appurtenance enclosures that are meant to appear like barn-like structure roofs that go up to 28 feet. The zoning district allows 50% site coverage. This project is at roughly 40%. There are no setback requirements in this zoning district, and in fact, the neighboring self-storage project buildings have a 0 setback. They're at the boundary. They create a fortress-type construction around the boundary of the site, whereas this project was designed differently to avoid the appearance of a compound, enclosed, I want to say Fort Apache, but you know what I mean. Fortress appearance. They've separated the buildings and left them open with roadways in between them all, an open space. So they're maintaining the 100-foot setback that's required from Carmel Valley Road. And then on the east, an average of 15.5 feet. On the west, a minimum of 20 feet. And down at A, we're close to Center Street, it's 66 feet, 66-foot setback. In fact, the Kaufman's home is actually closer to the 2-story office building across Center than it is to building A. And on the south, 28.5 minimum, going up to 63 feet. Next slide, please. This does a better job of illustrating, and I don't know if it's, can we zoom in? I can't remember that. Up at the top of building A, you'll see the darker shaded area, which is the walkway going into the red shaded pathway. So that has a better illustration of the connection between the pathway, but it will not pinch down there to nothing. It will maintain the width that comes through the. Oh, and Commissioner Hartzell, you mentioned about the proximity of the path to the back of the building. That's more or less what happens as it goes behind Storage Pro. Those Storage Pro buildings are right up against the boundary of the property, so the path is blocked visually in that location as well. Next slide, please. This is the 100-year flood. I think staff covered that. The structures in the property are not in the 100-year floodplain as currently mapped by FEMA. Next slide, please. There was a question at the last hearing about whether this was in the housing opportunity site. While it does appear in the 2010 general plan as a housing opportunity site, the most recent county submission to the state of California for its current housing element does not indicate it as such. As I mentioned in my letter, the state HCD has been somewhat critical already of this county's plans and opportunity sites not being realistic for near-term development, and this site, as I mentioned in the letter, would not either because there is no water or available sewer service for its development, forgetting the fact that it's zoned heavy commercial. Next slide, please. Another interesting thing that you don't typically run into is opposition from other commercial activities. In this case, a lawyer representing the neighboring project has complained about the design of the project and wishes to have it be built at a smaller size. And the letter alleges that they were forced to build the project they built in that way. Well, I guess fortunately or unfortunately, I've been around so long that I happen to be the person who obtained the approval for that project next door for the owner at the time. And that was the design that the owner wanted to have. There was never any discussion of floor area ratio because that doesn't even apply in this zoning district. There was tremendous neighborhood opposition to that project as well, almost identical to the comments you heard. In fact, the county supervisor at the time convened a meeting in his office to discuss with the neighbors alternative uses for the project site, and when they said they wanted the county to purchase it to build a park. In fact, one of the letters today even mentions dog park as an alternative use. The Board of Supervisors took up the appeal and approved the project as it was submitted. So this design is not, the design of the neighboring project is not a requirement of the county. It was not a condition to change what was submitted. It was a construct of the applicant. And in fact, it does, as you'll see in a second, have several two-story elements, including the one that's most visible from Carmel Valley Road and the one that's closest to the residential development between themselves and our project. There is a need, one of the other interesting comments that were made at when that one was approved was nobody wants or needs self-storage in Carmel Valley. That apparently is not the case. Because not only statistically is there an unmet demand for storage, because apparently nowadays you can find out what square footage everybody needs for everything, and there is for the population of the immediate area, including Big Sur and Kashawa and the Carmel area, who all use this self-storage, a demand, and there must be a big demand because none of the existing self-storage have basically any vacancy. Next slide, please. This is a quick primer on self-storage. The California average for a 10 by 10 foot unit is $112. In Salinas, they're $159. In Monterey, $253. In Carmel Valley, $272 for the converted theater at Mid-Valley Shopping Center. iStorage, which in the village is $314. And when we made this chart at Carmel Valley, the Storage Pro was $309 for a 10 by 10. You received a letter of support from a neighbor who said that she uses the Storage Pro and they're charging her now $550 a month for the 10 by 10 square foot storage unit at Storage Pro. If that's correct, that's over 4 times the national or California average and more than double the city cost in the city of Monterey. So there's definitely a need. And as you can see on the right-hand column, at Storage Pro, when we did this chart in the fall, there was only one 10 by 10 unit available. At Carmel Valley iStorage, only 2 units. And at Mid-Valley, they were all filled. Next, please. This neighborhood, in answer to Commissioner Getzelman's question, is a mixture of, in the immediate vicinity is zoned all commercial, and you can see a couple of the neighboring commercial buildings, which are obviously all 2-story, and multifamily residential, which you can't see very well because of the mature landscaping, but there are very large 2-story multifamily buildings that populate Center Street. So it's not a low-density residential neighborhood, and of course, you have the shopping center across the street from our site. Next slide, please. This is the Storage Pro site, as I mentioned a moment ago. That's a 26-foot story pole on our property boundary with them. You can see that's on the external boundary of their property. It's definitely not a single story. And that's the view from the entrance to the project on Carmel Valley Road. Again, the public definitely doesn't see single story there. Next slide, please. I'm sorry if the commissioners were unable to see the staking or all of the staking. It's been vandalized 3 times. We put it up 3 times at the cost of $12,000, and this is, I think, the unfortunate result of people damaging it. So I brought the architect with me today. He's going to briefly discuss his thought process in the design of the buildings and how he attempted to comply with the policies of the Carmel Valley Master Plan. The applicant is here with me. One last thing. The question about the road condition. This site is basically a balance cut and fill because, as you can see, it's very flat. So there's very little export of material. It's roughly 600 cubic yards, which is far less than our typical home excavation in the Carmel area is typically 1,000 yards or more. And the neighboring property owner has asked that we give them the dirt. So it doesn't appear that we'll have to do anything to remove the soil from the property. And of course, the construction equipment is moved onto the site, and then when it's finished, it's moved off the site, the foundation, the excavation, the grading equipment, so it's not a daily in and out. And I agree with Commissioner Deal's suggestion. It would be a very good idea to include some form of condition that the trail site not be blocked or in some way obstructed in the future. Basically, a condition mandating that the pathway be left open and unobstructed as a part of the project. I think that, that way, if something does happen in the future that causes a pathway to be blocked, which I don't know what it would be, but that way the condition could always be enforced if somebody in the future decided to do something that would obstruct it. So I hope I answered the questions that were asked, and I could turn it over to someone who knows a lot more about architecture than I do. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioner, staff. I'm Larry Gabriel, project architect for Gabriel Architects. We are located in Paso Robles, and we have worked with the applicant on another storage facility as well. So I think I might be able to clarify a couple things on this social path. Just if, Mary, can you pull up your deck 5, I think it is? The one that showed the site plan with the, no, your 5. That works right there, perfect. Can you zoom in on that? Okay, what we're showing, starting on the sidewalk coming down Center Street, as we're proposing a wheelchair access ramp right there as it enters our property line. We're proposing a path of travel that's designated with cross-hatching over and onto our walkway. And as you move to the left, that gray area that you're trying to figure out what it is truncated domes that you see in all the crosswalks so that the visually impaired don't go into traffic zone. So unfortunately, it just comes out dark. So there's direct access with a stroller, if you will, up across the Center Street, across to our property on our sidewalk, and onto the red social path, as we're calling it, I guess. So if we end up with DG or something that could be smoothed out and maintained, that's probably the best choice. So, and then again, for clarity, where we see the 20-foot driveway note between building A and B, which are the two buildings, that's where the sliding gate is right now. For between A and B, and in between B and the west property line is, as shown, just a little bit higher. That note on top that shows the wrought iron gates. That's the enclosure. So everything else is open. And so while I'm here, also notice that we moved the building back to facilitate the access to adjacent property. So from that, I've got my presentation, and I'm going to speak to the Carmel Valley Master Plan policies and guidelines, and hope we can get some clarity on some of the questions you've been asking.
Technicians, please share the monitor image. Thank you.
You can go to the next slide. For all intents and purposes, this is what you're going to see at this site. This is what's left of the project that's going to be visible once the vacant lot on Berwick is built out, assuming it's a two-story building to match the buildings left and right. So this is the main building A, and this is the one that's going to be viewed the most. As you can see, it's actually maybe a little bit lower, but pretty much the same height as a two-story building next door. So next slide, if you will. So as we're going here, we're trying to follow a rural architectural theme. So the theme is a subjective standard. It's not defined in the master plan. So as you see through our process here, we actually started with a red barn look and tried to run that route a little bit. It seemed to be a little aggressive for the project site as we've listened to the comments. So right now our project is more of the character of the adjacent buildings that surround the site. So again, the main entry building is the most exposed facade, and we are incorporating a single-story residential scale gable roof with a canopy that reflects residential porches in scale. Building E is a facade that faces Carmel Valley Road. The Carmel Valley Road has something of a 50-foot exposure. The building has multiple parapets varying in heights, mimicking the articulation of the building. It's hard to look at elevations and see that, but the building has step backs, if you will, to break up the structure. We also featured gable roofs as design elements on all the buildings to reflect the rural design of the adjacent buildings. Additionally, the buildings have faux windows and shade awnings to make them a little bit more residential, rural in feel. Building A and E, which is the most north and south buildings, also have trellises that we use to incorporate to, again, break up the building and get a little bit more residential. And if we can go to the next slide. Control height and bulk. So our buildings are designed with our structure is designed with 5 buildings of various square footages, trying to generate small facilities that doesn't look like a fortress. The 5 buildings are designed to avoid the monolith structure of one big mass building. We have decreased density to avoid, again, a fortress environment. So the buildings all have a 26-foot wide access road along the west property line. And you'll see in further slides that the buildings are actually articulated and not necessarily following the property line. It's set back as well. Building A is adjacent to a large open space and our social trail now. Building B, C, and D are area and open, all 360-degree circulation and access. And Building E faces Carmel Valley Road and has a 100-foot setback. So next slide. We've heard the comments and we've tried to respond to all of them. So the original design was the top that was kind of a little heavy, massive design. We came back with the LUAC. We presented the barn, little red barn look. Since then, and I thought we had this in our October presentation, but I didn't quite make it. The current design is a softer, lower, scaled down version. Our building A that, again, you're going to see the most of, has a single story gable added. So also from the last meeting, you guys asked that we lower the parapet on building A 4 feet, which we have done. And building E, it came down 2 feet, and I think it also did on building C. So we've responded to all the comments as you have presented them to us. And the next slide, I apologize, they're not both original designs, obviously. The green one is our current design. So you can see the difference between the original design to what we have now. The original design was coming back 26 feet and following the property line, basically, and we've broken that up. It also makes it more constructability with square corners than it does with acute angles. So building A has been reduced not only in width, but in depth. So you can see that as we've gone through the project. It might be a little, next slide, please. Might be a little easier to see in a 3D view of what's happened to the building. You can see that it's reduced tremendously. We've actually moved the building over and angled it so we get greater access to what is now the social path. So the next slide. So the portion on Berwick Drive is the vacant lot. And the original proposed barn look had a large gable and bright barn red colors to it. As you can see now, our building is scaled down. We've got patina green on light tan colors and a little more appropriate and in keeping with the adjacent buildings. And as you see on Center Street, it was a two tall gable roofs and again, barn red. We scaled it back down to a single-story gable and the porch that we have out in front. So more in keeping with the neighborhood and softer look as well. Next slide. Maximum height is 35 feet. We've lowered our buildings like 27% from the original design. The principal height, which is basically the parapets that are around the building, are really about 22 feet high. So we have the gables that are there, and they're there for multiple reasons. So the gable in the front on Building A, which is a building on the right, again, is to create an entry in a field that's more residential. The other gables are to break up the elevations a little bit. And we also have gables that are used to identify main entries to the lobbies and hide mechanical equipment. So the gables that are there, and they're only, you can see on the left-hand side that they're very shallow. They go up to 28'4", still well below the 35-foot dimension. So again, our design is set up to, or approaches the adjacent two-story buildings in size and nature. So again, the gable roof and the faux windows and the awnings are there to relate to the adjacent buildings, and they're all in keeping with commercial and residential two-story size facilities. So the mechanical equipment is screened. So the center gable that we have here identifies the lobby. So the features raised gable and enclose the elevator shaft. It screens the mechanical equipment, and it adds our visual directive to the main entry. So it's multifunctional. And again, that is about, and that building, which is most of the buildings, are 26'7". Only the front gable is there. Next slide. This is the fully landscaped version that you're going to see from Carmel Valley Road passing at 50 miles an hour. So no access here. This isn't slowed down to get to an access. This is you on a 50-foot view corridor with mature trees. Our next slide. We're proposing 23% landscape. That includes the habitat preserve, the biobasin, the landscape areas, and the open space. And so for our large trees, we've got valley oaks and coastal live oaks. Building E is screened from Valley Road, and it's like I say, shortly it's going to be obscured with oaks and blue elderberry and purple sage and toyon. The main entry, we have oak and western bud, deer grass, and coyote bush. It's going to soften the facade and be more residential in scale. We've responded to, the next slide, please. We've responded to the comments that we hear here. And so from our initial proposal to the LUAC meeting to the latest Planning Commission concerns. And so our project's been scaled back overall with square footage setbacks on the south property line. We reduced the massing and the scale, and we revised the color scheme from a red metal over tan structure to a patina green and light beige. So next, if you will. So these are our buildings when they're all finished. So if right now on Berwick, which is again a mistake, I'm sorry, Berwick and Center Street got confused, but the upper left is a Berwick view of the vacant lot and our building sitting back behind a slatted green fence with our building and the adjacent two-story building that we're in scale with. The upper right is Center Street, and this is the one that's going to get the most exposure. That, again, we sit back and we think we're representing a residential scale. The view on the bottom is the Carmel Valley Road before all the landscape matures, and one with the landscape matured, which is virtually obscuring the project, or the building, I'm sorry. So the last, I think we've met all the criteria with a rural architectural theme, minimizing the bulk, limiting the height, screening mechanical equipment, landscape areas that we've addressed, large growing trees, and environmentally compatible. So I'm available to answer any specific questions you might have, and thank you.
Commissioner Monsalve.
Thank you. Through the chair. Come back, please. I'm sorry. I don't remember your name.
Larry Gabriel.
Mr. Gabriel, thank you. Can you show us page 6 of your presentation and just describe what the traffic pattern is going to look like? And is there enough space if traffic is going to be going in both directions?
While we're doing this on page 6, the facility when it's full has had something like maximum of 12 visitors a day. So the path in and out and crossing the pedestrian path shouldn't be any heavy traffic to worry about.
Excuse me, Mr. Gabriel, I'm sorry. Through the chair, can we get page 6 up on this report? Thank you.
And your asking question is?
Traffic, how will traffic pattern look here? I'm just wondering if it's going to go down in between the buildings and around the far side.
Yes, so
Will there be
on the
enough space for-
bottom is our current design, and you will enter through the black gate there between the two buildings on the top, A and B, and you go through at the 26-foot wide drive, and you go down to the end with a 26-foot wide drive at the end, and you come back up between B and C. All along the bottom or the west side is a 26-foot drive also. So 26-foot drive on the west, 26-foot drive on the east, and 26-foot drive in between all the buildings.
So what's the largest size vehicle that could make that 90-degree turn at the far end?
It should be, it's a 26-foot U-Haul truck. It's not set up for 53-foot diesels at all, but it's set up for common moving vans.
Thank you so much.
Commissioner Shaw.
Thank you. I don't know if you can answer this particular question. During construction, the social path is not going to be usable, and I'm wondering how that's going to be navigated and potentially how long that would be unusable to the public for.
That's a great question. I don't think I have that answer. You want to speak to that? I'll let the applicant speak to that.
Thank you.
My name is Will Tucker. I'm the applicant. I think it will take about 12 months to build the project. In the initial beginning, there might be about 3 months where the trail is hard to access through there. And then we can remove the temporary construction fencing for safety. And so it shouldn't be, once I get the dirt compacted and the foundation for building A done, we can scale that back to where it's not cutting off the path. So about 3 months is what it would be. Unless it was, we're not going to build it during the rainy season, so I might be able to do it even quicker.
Through the chair. So once the foundation for building A is put down, that trail is going to be free and clear for people to navigate? I don't see how you would build that wall.
The fence will be cutting all that off. And that's the first building we're going to build. And those metal buildings with the block on it, they go up really quick.
Thank you.
Mako does it. They do about 5,000 square feet a week is what they can build.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, if No other commissioner has questions from the applicant. Commissioner Shaw?
Sorry, just one more question. I just noticed in this that it says that the applicant will request that visitors not use their high beam headlight function, and I just wanted to have that in the event this is approved, have that changed. I don't see why that can't be made a rule. I would not want people driving around with high beams in there, reflecting into the neighborhood or the immediate neighbor's house.
Okay, thank you. With that, we're going to go ahead and open the public, continue with the public hearing with anybody in the chambers that would like and speak to the issue. You can come up to the podium. Okay, we'll go ahead and take about a 10-minute break right now, and then we'll be back in about 10 minutes. We might have to take another break after this 10-minute break, but we'll play it by ear. So we'll be back in about 10 minutes.
I'll be here by noon, man. I got other business to deal with.
go ahead and restart the meeting again. And for the record, all the commissioners that were present at the beginning are present here. I don't believe we need to do a roll call unless I'm wrong. But with that, we'll go ahead again and continue with the public hearing. And anybody who is present that in the chambers that would like to come and make a presentation, you have about 3 minutes. So please come up and go ahead and make sure you state your name, and then you have 3 minutes. Thank you. Could you please use the microphone?
My name is Tracy Kaufman, and I live on Berwick Drive. It's the house on the residential side. There's commercial and residential, and we are the residential house right next to the proposed storage unit. The drainage issue, I sent in those pictures. For years, we've been asking for, and nobody's ever come to us and said, hey, your tree or any of these trees. So as a neighbor, I've never been contacted via phone, email, or letter about that. So, and I guess this can't go up, but I wanted to show, even though there's a lot of commercial, there are commercial stuff, everything on the other side is a residential neighborhood and residential. Okay, and I wrote this. Now, I wrote this before they said they were leaving the trail in and stuff, so. Okay, my family moved to the valley because of the rural and beautiful community. These parcels were zoned light commercial. Along the years, they were rezoned to heavy commercial without the knowledge or consideration of anybody in the neighborhood. The proposed storage unit violates the Carmel Valley Master Plan in multiple ways. First, any new construction built shall meet the following criteria. 1, low visibility. 2, safe and unobtrusive access away from pedestrians' traffic street areas. 3, low noise impact on surrounding areas. Our home sits on Center Street, where the incoming and outgoing traffic for the proposed 400 storage unit facility is intended to travel. Why can't they access the storage unit from Carmel Valley Road and exit on Center Street? The safety of our neighborhood is in jeopardy. We have so many elderly residents, children, and dogs in our neighborhood. Many people travel to our neighborhood to exercise and walk their dogs because of the safety and peaceful atmosphere. We dog sit many rescue dogs whom have been severely abused and are skittish. We can't imagine how giant trucks and U-Hauls will scare them into flight mode. I have read the hours of the storage facility are from 7:30 a.m. till 10 p.m., 7 days a week. Potential traffic for almost 15 hours a day. The project owner is not from here and doesn't care about our valley or our people. He said at a meeting with us he would scale down the buildings and leave the walking trail, which gives the whole community of Carmel Valley Ranch and Robinson Canyon access to Mid-Valley Shopping Center. Again, taking away this historic path goes against the Carmel Valley Master Plan, where it says the needs of bicyclists, pedestrians, utilities, and drainage shall be considered, and where appropriate, provided for all public right-of-ways, where such improvements will be safe for the intended use. The builders are only concerned about how the project looks from Carmel Valley Road. What about how the project looks from the people having to look at it in my neighborhood? They're completely blocking our view of hills. The project is huge, obtrusive, and unnecessary. This again violates the Carmel Valley Master Plan that states it is intended that Carmel Valley remain rural and residential in character. They say they will have no signs and it will be well hidden from Carmel Valley Road. That just means many people will accidentally turn off on Doris Drive and speed around the neighborhood. A quick Google search tells you everything you need to know to undoubtedly oppose construction. Pollution, primarily due to environmental impact on their construction. Electricity for lighting and climate control, and an increased truck traffic associated with...
Could you please wrap it up in the next 15 seconds?
Okay, she gave me her 3 minutes. Can you not do that? No?
Okay. Crime and theft. Storage units increase crime because they can be attractive targets for criminals. Theft, vandalism, illegal dumping, drug storage. I will conclude by saying that there are currently 2 self-storage facilities in Mid-Valley Shopping Center and a giant 400-unit storage facility directly next to the proposed site. Anyone who believes we need another storage facility is perhaps out of touch with reality. My biggest concern is safety and how dangerous Center Street will become when the narrow road has 2-way traffic on a residential street. I am terrified for the day someone is hurt or killed by an accident waiting to happen.
Thank you, ma'am. We have to wrap it up. Thank you. Anybody else that would like to address the commission that is in the chambers? Then anybody in Zoom or email?
There are 2 hands up on Zoom. We have, I'm sorry, wrong mouse. Hold on 1 second. Paula, you should be able to, looks like you're unmuted. You should be able to speak. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, is this for Paula Bertrand, right? I'm responding in opposition to this project. I'm not sure where Tony Lombardo is getting his numbers with regards to the number of units that are currently available in terms of storage units. But right now, from the numbers that I counted, there are 29 units available open between the 3 current storage units that are there at Mid-Valley. So this is a really wasteful project of this land. And it does not it's not in keeping with the master plan policies in terms of the Carmel Valley 1.9 structures proposed in open grassland areas be highly visible from Carmel Valley Road shall be minimized in number and clustered near existing natural man-made vertical features, as well as the development either shall be visually compatible with the character of the valley and immediate surrounding areas or shall enhance the quality of areas that have been degraded by existing development. And it also is a development, including road cuts as well as structures, should be located in a manner that minimizes disruption of views from existing homes. And while they brought the height and bulk down a little tiny bit, it's still not an appropriate scale for the location. And it blocks off the whole view of what's left there that you see of the Carmel River riparian area. And then with regards to the oak tree that they want to take out, it seems really kind of pointless that they can't figure out a way to save that one oak tree rather than cutting it down. I'm not quite sure what tree it is, but with one tree on that whole lot, why can't they save it? Again, I'm in opposition to this project. It is not in keeping with the local area, even if it is zoned heavy commercial. It's just not appropriate for this location. Thank you.
And then we have V. Multa. You should be able to unmute.
Good morning. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. Well, good morning, Honorable Chair, Commissioners, and staff. My name is Vince Moita. I'm here on behalf of our client, self-storage owner and operator, Storage Pro, the adjacent self-storage property owner. And we wanted to reiterate our support for this project. We recognize the need for the additional storage in the area and welcome the competition. So we're not in objection to this project. However, our sole request is for a fair and level playing field for our client, particularly in light of the entitlements the applicant seeks. The staff report for today's hearing, as well as the commission staff discussion from the October 31st, 2024 hearing, affirmed that this project is fully complies with the general plan, the specific plans. The most recent staff report, finding number 1, clearly states consistency The project as conditioned is consistent with the applicable plans and the policies which designate this area as an appropriate for development. That comes from the February 26th staff report, Exhibit B, Draft Resolution, Section 1. We fully respect that determination. Our position is simple. The same standards and treatment should be applied to our client's property, both historically, when it was entitled over a decade ago, and prospectively going forward. Consistency is not just a best practice, it's a legal requirement. To apply different standards to adjacent properties with nearly identical zoning and development criteria risks unjustifiable and unlawful spot zoning. Under the Monterey County Code, both light and heavy commercial zones impose identical requirements for heights, setbacks, and density with no stated floor area ratio, limitation under sections 2118.070 and 21.20.070. We've included both standards in our written comments. Despite this parity, our client's project was capped at a 53% FAR when viewed in scope of the project proposed, while the current applicant is seeking a 76% FAR. While there is no zoning requirement for the FAR standards, it goes to the bulk of the actual proposed building and approved building potentially, which is a 23% increase in the massing for the applicant's project versus our client's project without a meaningful zoning distinction. California Government Code Section 65852 is clear, where it states, all such zoning regulations shall be uniform for each class or kind of building or their use throughout each zone of land use. With no material difference between the development standards for these sites, our client should be afforded the same rights under the general plan and the Carmel Valley Master Plan. We respectfully request that the Commission ensure uniform application of the FAR standards that have been ultimately enforced by one, either modifying the project to match the 53 FAR as applied to our client site, which we disfavor, we support this project as proposed, or two, granting our client the same 76% FAR for future expansion. While this isn't a requirement in the zoning code standards, we see it only as equitable, and our client is open to either solution. This is not about opposition, it's about fairness, consistency, and compliance with the California uniform zoning requirements. With that, we respectfully submit, and we thank you so much for your time, and we strongly support this project.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on Zoom or any emails?
There are no additional emails and no hands on Zoom.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Chair. Larry Bacon just raised his hand.
Go ahead.
And he just lowered his hand again. I'm going to ask him to unmute and see if he's able to do that.
All right, I have just unmuted. Thank you. Before you start my time, could I ask that you bring up deck 5? I want to talk about the entrance area to this project off of Center Street.
I'm sorry, Larry, could you repeat the question?
Yes, could you bring up deck 5, which shows the schematic for the rendering, not the rendering, but the drawing for the entrance to the project off of Center Street.
Okay, it looks like staff are working on that, and it should appear via Zoom. There's a little delay from the room to the Zoom view, so just give it.
Please don't penalize me on time for that aspect.
Can you go ahead and restart it to 3 minutes?
All right, thank you. So two aspects. What we thought was a fence at the south corner of the entrance. The squiggly line apparently is a curb, but it's not clear to me why that should not be easily available for crossing by a bicycle or a handicapped facility. Also, it's not clear to me why there's necessarily a 5-foot extra section in the parking area that would allow a little more of a width to the trail. And then it would, I think, for preservation of the public interest in the trail itself, it would help if the crosshatching continued across what I gather will be a paved area.
Hi, Larry. It looks like you muted yourself.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, we can hear you again.
Okay. Also, the crosshatch area, that's a traffic area and is complicated as far as access. A much simpler and direct and safer solution would be to add a sidewalk on Center Street that would lead directly to the more opening area to the trail. And that side of Center Street, the building that's there has its own contained parking off-site. And the times I've been there, rarely have there been cars on that side. You could even mark it a no parking zone if width of the street is an aspect, if sidewalk is installed on the other side. That sidewalk might also help with the drainage problem at the Berwick end of Center Street. So those are basically some suggestions that we have. Also, longer term, concern about how this area, which is now completely in the control of the applicant, is protected for the public. And I would hope that in some form of approval or record or easement, the commission can find a way to establish that in perpetuity, that this is a public trail. It certainly qualifies under prescriptive easement conditions in the state of California. And we would hate to see it at some future time under ownership of this property simply disappear. And then just as a last comment for the benefit of the owner, and I think Commissioner Hartzell probably saw this yesterday, there's a fence along at the edge of the fall-off ridge. There's a section of it missing at this point in time, and it's being used by motorized vehicles as a hill climbing area, and it's eroding that ridge. And related to that, it would make a great deal of sense to put a fence because of the steepness of that ridge, the narrowing down to—
Could you please go ahead and wrap it up?
To put a fence along the top of the ridge. So those are my points. Extend the hatched area, change the access from the south side of Center Street to the trail.
Thank you.
And put a fence. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll go ahead and ask the applicant. Well, I'm sorry, hold on for a second. Are there any other members in Zoom or email?
No, there are no additional emails or hands up on Zoom.
Okay, go ahead. And Mr. Lombardo?
I'd have a photograph, if we could put the overhead back on to show you the tree we're talking about. That's the oak tree. Unfortunately for the oak tree, it was growing on the boundary of the Storage Pro property. And as you can see, the Storage Pro side of the property line has removed all the vegetation from the east side of the tree because it would have gone into their building. So the tree is not a very good tree. So that's the one we're taking out and replacing it with some three, as staff mentioned, live oak and coast live oak and trees that presumably will be in a better spot to flourish than that poor tree is. The attorney for Our neighbor, I'm not quite sure what he was asking for. He apparently continues to refer to an FAR standard for our project. There is no FAR standard in this zoning district. There wasn't one when the neighboring project was approved, and the design of that project is the design of that project. I guess if I think he was suggesting that you approve a change to that project. I guess if they want to change, they can make an application, you'll consider it, but it has nothing really to do with this project. Mr. Bacon's was asking about why the pedestrian access was taken across the front of the building to Center Street. That's where the sidewalk is on the north side of the street. So there is no sidewalk on the south side. I suspect that the resident of the south, on the south side of Center, would not be pleased with the sidewalk being added there if they weren't interested in the trees being removed on the corner. It sounds like that would be not, they probably wouldn't be interested in that either. So that's why that was done that way. And as to the fence, I don't know if the commission prefers that be fenced. It seemed like once the buildings are there, the dirt track will, in fact, you saw what's been happening recently in that last slide I showed you. Someone's been going out there and digging up the site, using it for, I don't know if it's a BMX or whatever, bicycles or whatever it is, but I think once the buildings are there and the path is there, that's going to more or less eliminate the attractive nuisance or desirability of that kind of activity. So our civil engineer is also on the Zoom if you have any technical questions. Other than that, that's our presentation. Thank you very much. We would hope you would support the staff recommendation with the change conditions that we discussed during the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we're going to bring it back to staff to see if they had an opportunity to work on some of the added conditions or kind of questions that needed to be answered or by some of the questions that the commissioners had. So with that, bring it back to staff.
Thank you, Chair. Staff did distribute a draft for a new language for condition number 3, landscape plan and maintenance, which is on the dais and also on the table for the public. For the benefit of the rest of the public in Zoom, staff requests. Would the technicians please share by HDMI for staff, right? Thank you. All right, so this draft language with the red line was distributed to the dais. And since then, there's been some suggestions that came in to staff for deleting a few phrases, and staff will walk through that now. So, and this is, some of these deletions and new language is new to the applicant. He did see the red line that everyone else saw, but so this is his first time seeing slate edits. Including into this landscape plan and maintenance is the phrase informal pedestrian path. And so it is currently drafted with a couple of the phrases deleted and some additional wording that's added as a comment bubble. This would read, starting in the new edits, landscape with respect to vegetative screening shall be equivalent or greater than that shown in the draft landscaping plan, even if the distance from buildings may be amended somewhat to ensure alignment with updated fire fuel safety regulations. The final landscape plan shall include the informal pedestrian path currently indicated by red hatching in the planning permit plans attached to the February 26, 2025 resolution. And then there's already a statement there about landscaping plan being installed and inspected. So then also the informal pedestrian path shall be surfaced with decomposed granite or similar and shall be maintained to provide clear passage for pedestrians, end sentence. So that is new wording for this. And if you will indulge me, scrolling down into these, after it says HCD planning at the top of the screen, when we move into the actions required for a resolution of a condition of approval. And in this case, they start with prior to issuance of building permits. You bring in a landscape architect. They submit the landscape plan for approval, and that is why staff was expressing the steps for landscape plan review, spending a lot of time doing condition compliance. And then prior to issuance of building permits, they submit down here, the second to the bottom, the regular language states that they submit prior to occupancy, the owner, applicant, licensed landscape contractor, or licensed landscape architect shall ensure that the landscaping shall be installed and inspected. And staff is adding in another line prior to occupancy. Same group shall ensure that the informal pedestrian path is installed and inspected. And then adding to the ongoing basis, all landscape areas, the improved informal pedestrian path and fences shall be continuously maintained. And then adding another final line that on an ongoing basis, the improved informal pedestrian path shall be kept open and clear for pedestrian access by the owner applicant. So if the commissioners find that that's suitable, we could also turn it to the applicant to see if they agree with slight updates. Thank you.
Commissioner Deal?
Thank you. I'm really impressed with drafting on the fly. It's always extremely challenging. I want to suggest, starting from the top, that we memorialize that the informal path connection to the public street is also to be maintained. That's hardscaping, and it's been shown on our drawings, but should the use of that property ever change in the future, I'd want to make sure that the path, which doesn't currently show a connection to the adjacent public area, that there's something about that in there. So maybe just to say that that there's a need to maintain the access to the adjacent public street somehow. I don't know what the best way to do that is. That would be a suggestion. And following up on Commissioner Shaw's comment, the only other thing I would say on the final thing was perhaps we could say that during construction, the path shall be maintained and available for the public use as much as possible, consistent with safety, or something like that, just to take note of that concern as well. But I really appreciate the effort here to try to write down what we're doing so that we can have it in front of it. I do think that's really good work. So thank you on that. And I will have some more questions later, Mr. Chair, but I'll stop for now.
Any other questions from the commission? Commissioner Hartzell.
Thank you, through the chair. The safety issues that are being brought up about driving in the neighborhood, I just want to confirm. There is a sidewalk on one side of Center Street that leads up to the applicant's property, and then on the other side of the social path, which goes through 3 other properties over on Robinson Canyon Road, there's also a sidewalk on that side. Is that am I accurate in my assessment there? How about just Center Street? There is a sidewalk on Center Street on one side?
Through the chair, there is a sidewalk on Center Street on one side and not on the other side. And when the CVA letter came in suggesting an additional sidewalk be installed, staff discussed it among Housing and Community Development. And we found that it would be potentially narrowing the end of Center Street and adding to traffic congestion at the end, particularly with regard to the opportunity site that is suggested for the next parcel over. And secondly, engineering services staff looked at it and didn't think that that adding a second sidewalk would be required to serve this project, or to maybe Mr. Fernandez can put it in his own words, but the way that he expressed it to me was that the rural character of the rest of Berwick Manor had laid out all of the streets without sidewalks on both sides, and so it would be an abrupt change for that last block.
Thank you, through the chair. Maintaining a walkable community, I associate that with maintaining a rural character. I'm new here, so maybe that's not the thing. But just wanting to comment that the walkability of this particular hub is really important, and being able to access that shopping center from the neighboring communities is also really important. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Deal?
Thank you. And I really appreciate Commissioner Herzl's comments because, and again, Public Works' response, we didn't hear from them, but as paraphrased, is a little puzzling because we're just talking about a sidewalk on Berwick. I mean, and then it crosses over into the existing infrastructure on the other side of Center Street. So we're not talking about sidewalks everywhere. We're talking about a small section of sidewalk on Berwick that would do that. But setting that aside, because it's not before us at the moment, if the applicant is amenable and we are okay with an amended version of the conditions as proposed for condition 3, I have one other suggestion in the findings and evidence, which is on page 21. We're finding one, I think it's, I'm not sure what it is. It's the one about, it's a very long condition, and unfortunately, my report fell down, so I don't have the page before it. Oh, there it is. So it's, I believe, evidence K. And looking at the section right before the subsequent evidence L, there's a sentence that says, applicant voluntarily made room for the social trail to continue to be used. Okay, so that's really good. But before that, the description talks about the recommendation for the applicant to adjust the size and siding of building A because it actually is sited on top of the social trail across the property. We've rerouted that social trail. So just to make sure that our evidence is not, it had been, it is still, but we have made an alternative, and I really appreciate that. So that is very minor, but I just think it's important to not suggest that that trail has been or would be abandoned at any point in time. I know it's nitpicking, but that's the way that I am. And unless there are further comments, one request for staff before I start, which is, could we ask staff to please include cut and fill on all project descriptions at the beginning in the project, first project outline? It really helps me. But going from there, as has Mr. Lombardo, I talked about, I remember vividly the Storage Pro application, which at that time had a different name. And it just, for those of you who weren't involved then, to say it's similar and we have similar comments is kind of not accurate. What we had was filled chambers on multiple occasions full of people who said many of the same things, but it was dramatic and it was contentious. It can extended over years. I think Commissioner Getzelman is smiling over there, so he may have some, he may want to correct me if I'm wrong. And it also got the then supervisor, Mr. Potter, to convene a community process around it. It was that much of a community controversy that he decided it was important to try to do what he could to resolve that. We're not seeing that here. That's not what's before us now. We've had comments from people with some of the same points, but we have not had that magnitude of concern expressed. And I think that may be because the experience with the project that was built turned out not to be as upsetting as the fear of that project had been. So I'm prepared to move forward with this. I just want to, as I say, reference the history, and I also have to take a small sideline to say that Mr. Lombardo has a history of representing applicants who don't care for dog parks, so that comment just should go in on his record. We do need to, I'm very cognizant of the comments from the Storage Pro advocate. I just want to address those really directly. So I read those and I thought about them a good deal because of the history of the project. And I want to just go through my reasoning very briefly, which says that the zoning is different. Design review is discretionary. We've got to do what's in front of us now. And given all of that, we are dealing with the design in front of us, and any decision that would be made about the neighbor would be in the context, as Mr. Lombardo again has said, of a project if they chose to bring one forward subsequently. I would be absolutely convinced that our commission would look at that with the appropriate specifics that it deserves. So as far as those comments are concerned, I don't dismiss them, but I don't find them to be particularly a part of my own decision-making process. So I really appreciate the changes that this project has gone through. I think that the applicant has been exceedingly responsive to the concerns expressed, and I don't take that lightly. I really do appreciate it. And I appreciate the changes staff has made to memorialize all those. And with all of that taken, and assuming that the amendments that have been proposed here and then the minor adjustments that staff will include based on the comments are acceptable to everyone, I'd like to move this project forward as recommended by staff. Oh, and one more thing. I just got to say to the folks that would like another use, which I agree with, if at some time in the future there was water and wastewater, this has been site prepared. This will be a site that would be in good shape for subsequent development should that become possible. So you could take down those buildings if you needed to. It wouldn't be impossible to do that. So just in my reasoning again. So I move approval of this project with those.
Commissioner Mendoza?
Yes, that's the motion. I second her motion.
It's a motion by Commissioner Deal, seconded by Commissioner Mendoza. Any other questions? If not, all those, Commissioner Shaw?
All right, I don't really have a question. I think that my questions are just numerous and can't be answered within the time that we're doing this. And I don't know that the information even exists that would make me feel comfortable moving this forward at this time. And I just wanted to express that I think it is a great project. I really think that they've been very responsive to the community and the Planning Commission, and made a lot of great changes at, I'm sure, great cost. But I think some of these impacts, the traffic impacts, can't be mitigated, and I haven't seen information that I feel is factual enough, considering the applicant owns other facilities, so we could have actual in and out information, times of day. There's a record of this to make me feel comfortable approving that. So I'm very much on the fence, and I just wanted to express that, why my vote will be the way it is. Thank you.
Commissioner Monsalve?
Thank you, Chair Gonzalez. I just wanted to reiterate that the motion includes, which we do not see here, some language regarding the connection of the trail to the public street adjacent, and that the path access is going to be limited or restricted only during the construction of Building A, which is what I remember we heard from the applicant directly. That's it. Thank you.
Okay.
To clarify, my motion is intended to address that with additional language staff. I'm assuming staff will be able to draft.
Any other questions, comments? If not, then can we do a roll call on this, please?
Commissioner Shaw?
No.
Commissioner Getzelman?
Yes.
Commissioner Work is absent. Commissioner Gonzalez?
Yes.
Commissioner Mendoza?
Yes.
Commissioner Deal?
Yes.
Commissioner Monsalve?
Yes.
Commissioner Hartzell?
Yes.
Commissioner Gomez?
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts is absent. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you very much. And then we're going to continue. I guess there's, let me see, what's the next item? Report. Department report.
Hi, thank you. I just have a couple of quick items that I just wanted to flag for the commission and the public. Since your last meeting, the Board of Supervisors did approve 4 new positions to be added to the Housing and Community Development Department, which include 2 code enforcement staff, 1 permit tech, 3, and an assistant associate professor, planner position to help support the vacation rental permit program and enforcement program. So we're looking forward to adding those positions. Just very briefly, I just wanted to note that there was a referral that was discussed at the Planning Commission with regard to Measure Z and Measure Z's ban on fracking and a change in recent state law that would allow local jurisdictions to adopt such changes, and that was discussed, and so there are some corresponding updates that will be moving forward based on that referral and discussion and direction from the board. I was out for the last 2 weeks, so I apologize if there were other actions that would be appropriate to flag. Those are what I have. Thank you.
You're welcome. And with that, we'll adjourn the meeting at 12:03. Have a great rest of the day.